Okay.
Welcome back to the channel, family, and another podcast. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm delighted to have been joined by Anthony.
Yes. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. My name's Anthony V. I'm a grateful recovered drug addict, grateful member of Cocaine Anonymous. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for asking me, Paul, to be on the podcast.
It's always great to hear you. And today we are continuing our wonderful journey through the 12 traditions of Cocaine Anonymous. We have already completed a series of 7 broadcasts on the first 7 traditions. Today is tradition 8. What we normally do is read out the traditions in order before we get on to today's reading. So just want to make a couple of points. During this broadcast, there'll be information about meetings and literature on the screen. Please remember you can pause or rewind or indeed share this podcast with others wherever you see it. If you're needing help, reach out in the conversation, whether it's on Skype, in the rooms, YouTube or WhatsApp, and get involved and come along to a Zoom meeting, and more information will be on the screen about that. Also on this channel, there is over 4 dozen podcasts on the 12 steps, the spiritual malady, the ABCs of addiction. There's about a dozen personal stories. So there's lots of resources and knowledge and wisdom and information about how we recover, the steps we took, the journey we walked and the freedom that we got. So please reach out, stay connected and check out the other broadcasts. Do you want to start us off, Anthony? Should I make that a little bit like that? How's that?
Okay, yeah. The first tradition, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity.
Tradition 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern.
Third tradition, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking.
Amen. The fourth tradition, each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups, or AA as a whole.
The fifth tradition, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers.
Tradition 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property and prestige divert us from our primary purpose.
The seventh tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
And the theme of today's podcast, the 8th tradition, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centres may employ special workers. Now we've got some little graphics there. There's a chap, and you was just talking to someone in recovery earlier, wasn't you, Anthony? And I was too, right before this podcast. I was on step 9. And you was talking with a gentleman. And here's a gentleman here taking a phone call, probably a request for a 12-step call. And in the speech bubble, he's saying no one could pay me to go out, but yeah, I'll come over if I can help you recover from addiction.
Yeah, actually says no one could pay me to go out on a night like this. It's raining, there's storms, and then he's thinking that in his mind, isn't he? And then he says, "Yeah, okay, I'll be right over."
Yeah.
So that's a 12-step, service, generosity of spirit. Okay, yeah. And that guy, if you enlarge the picture a bit, the other guy standing at the door there, it says AA therapy, drunks helped here. 1 hour, $10. So
yeah, I think it's the theme of, that there's no money involved. It's completely altruistic, isn't it?
It is, yeah, completely altruistic. There's only special workers that get paid.
Yeah, so there's 6 paragraphs.
That's right.
Why don't we do 3 each, Anthony?
Yep. Okay. All right. I'll kick us off. My name's Anthony B. I'm a grateful recovered drug addict, alcoholic, grateful member of our 12-step program. Spiritual as it is, AA remains very much of this world. The eighth tradition is like the seventh, focuses on a vulgar 5-letter word that isn't actually mentioned in either: money. Many of us have had to explain to some cynical prospect, no, I'm not a social worker. I don't get paid for talking with you. I'm doing it because it's the best way to stay sober for myself. This does not mean, of course, that the idea of turning professional has never entered any AA's mind. In the lean years, Bill W. did think of becoming a lay therapist to earn money through his experience in helping alcoholics. But with a strong nudge from the group conscience, he soon realized that he could never hang out a shingle reading Bill W. AA therapist $10 an hour. It became clear to early members that no AA should ever ask or accept payment for carrying this message to somebody else, person to person and face to face. But new questions arose as membership grew and the word of hope spread. Sending thousands of alcoholics in search of AA, the first intergroups or central offices were usually manned by AA volunteers. Now, most such offices are so busy that full-time employees are needed as well. Naturally, AAs, NAs, CAs are better suited to such jobs than are non-members. But these AAs, them being paid for doing 12-step work? No. In the office, they are just paving the way for this work, arranging to get a sick drunk into a hospital, telling a shaky newcomer where the nearest meeting is tonight. They are helping to make it possible for the alcoholic to hear the message person to person and face to face. Pass on.
A similar development has taken place at the Fellowship's headquarters. Once a tiny office for one co-founder, Bill, and one secretary, it has grown into the present General Service Office, fully staffed with a big mail room, keeping the lines of communication open throughout AA worldwide. The employees, both AA and non-alcoholic, are paid on a scale comparable to that in profit-making enterprises, so that the office force can function dependably. And the AA staff members are in exactly the same position as the AA intergroup employees. Suppose you drop in at GSO one day when you're in New York. Staff members who pose to chat with you may have been working on next year's conference or corresponding with a group in your home area, helping it to carry the message more effectively. For that, they are paid bi-weekly checks. But you may also hear them mention to other staff members plans for taking a newcomer to a meeting in the evening, or for giving an AA talk to a neighbourhood group the next week. For that, they are paid only with their own continuing sobriety. In these office jobs and in other assignments, members are actually paid for their business and professional skills. Working at a GSO desk or conference, approved books and pamphlets, or on the grapevine, these AAs use their abilities as correspondents, managers, writers, editors, artists, proofreaders, as well as their understanding of AA from the inside. On occasion, volunteers have given their time and talent to all these services, and their contributions are deeply appreciated. But what if the fellowship decided that all such assignments should be handled only by unpaid volunteers? In present day AA, there's too great a volume of work to be done in spare hours here and there, and only the rich or the retired could afford to work full time. If we tried to find in this limited group peoples qualified for particular tasks, obviously the field would be narrowed down too often, down to nobody at all. There would be another problem in using volunteers alone. It seems ungrateful, or at least it's socially awkward, to criticise or reject a job done for free. But paid jobs for AA get quite a going over. Take our literature, for instance, like this pamphlet. Whatever the subject, we want to be sure that each piece expresses as clearly as possible the view of the group conscience of AA as a whole. So any new project must first be approved by the conference. Once it is in process, the Literature Committee of the General Service Board keeps a careful eye on it at every stage. Frequently, drastic changes are required. The finished product then must be okayed both by that committee and by the Conference Literature Committee, and further revisions are often. Now, wait a minute, some old timer may interrupt. What's going on here? Didn't Dr. Bob say? Let's keep it simple. Now, what do you think of that while I'm getting the other screen up, Anthony?
Well, you know, Tradition 8 allows contributions to be used for support services, while the groups provide only non-professional mutual support, ensuring AA and Al-Anon remains, you know, an unpaid non-professional organisation. You know, any time a newcomer reaches out for help, they will receive it free of charge. In turn, as members freely share their own experience, strength and hope with the newcomer, they help themselves to reinforce their own recovery, right? But, you know, when it's hiring special workers, 12-step organisations as a national state, you know, and regional levels may have service centres and serve the fellowship as a whole by printing and distributing literature, you know, and meeting schedules, maintaining answering services, and other tasks like archivists. You know, I've got a friend, he's a world archivist, he gets paid for doing that as well, you know. And many times these central offices and services centres involve more work than the volunteer services, as we just read, workers can provide. So, you know, some special hire full-time, part-time employees to do the necessary labour to keep it running smoothly, because that's the backbone. See, we need to make sure that that is running smoothly to pave the way. You know, so other people who've got other occupations and do it on a voluntary aspect, that's all good. We do that through, you know, the generosity of spirit, because it's altruism. You know, it's a spiritual and altruistic movement, but we also need the people there to make sure that the other tasks are being dealt with, and then people have to be paid.
Splendid. Tradition 8, shall I read the first page, Anthony, and do roughly a page each?
Yeah, Paul.
Right. Tradition 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centres may employ special workers. Alcoholics Anonymous will never have a professional class. We've gained some understanding of the ancient words, freely ye have received, freely give. We've discovered that at the point of professionalism, money and spirituality do not mix. Almost no recovery from alcoholism has ever been brought about by the world's best professionals, whether medical or religious. We do not decry professionalism in other fields, but we accept the sober fact that it does not work for us. Every time we've tried to professionalize our 12-step, the result has been exactly the same. Our singleness of purpose has been defeated. Alcoholics simply will not listen to a paid 12-stepper. Almost from the beginning, we've been positive that face-to-face work with the alcoholic who suffers could be based only on the desire to help and to be helped. When an AA talks for money, whether at a meeting or to a single newcomer, it can have a very bad effect on him too. The money motive compromises him or her in everything he or she says and does for his prospect. This has always been so obvious that only very few AAs have ever worked the 12-step for a fee. Over to thee, Anthony.
Okay, despite this certainty, it is nevertheless true that few subjects have been the cause of more contention within our fellowship than professionalism. Caretakers who swept floors, cooks who fried hamburgers, secretaries in offices, authors writing books, all these we have seen hotly assailed because they were, as their critics angrily remarked, making money out of AA, ignoring the fact that these labours were not 12-step jobs at all. The critics attacked as AA professionals these workers of ours who were often doing thankless tasks that no one else could or would do. Even greater fervours were provoked when AA members began to run rest homes and farms for alcoholics. When some hired out to corporations as personal men in charge of the alcoholic problem in industry, when some became nurses on alcoholic wards, when others entered the field of alcohol education, all these instances and more, it was claimed that AA knowledge and experience were being sold for money. Hence, these people too were professionals. At last, however, a plain line of cleavage could be seen between professionalism and non-professionalism. When we had agreed that the 12th step couldn't be sold for money, we had been wise. But when we had declared that our fellowship couldn't hire service workers, nor could any AA member carry our knowledge into other fields, we were taking the counsel of fear, fear which today has been largely dispelled in the light of experience. Take the case of the club janitor and cook. If a club is going to function, it has to be habitable and hospitable. We tried volunteers who were quickly disenchanted with sweeping floors and brewing coffee 7 days a week. They just didn't show up. Even more important, an empty club couldn't answer its telephone, but it was an open invitation to a drunk on a binge who possessed a spare key. So somebody had to look after the place full time. If we hired an alcoholic, he'd receive only what we have to pay a non-alcoholic for the same job. The job was not to do 12 step work. It was to make 12 step work possible. It was a service proposition, pure and simple. Pass it over, Paul.
Neither could AA itself function without full-time workers. At the foundation and intergroup offices, we couldn't employ non-alcoholics as secretaries. We had to have persons who knew the AA pitch. But the minute we hired them, the ultra-conservative and fearful ones shrilled, "Professionalism!" At one period, the status of least faithful servants was almost unbearable. They weren't asked to speak at AA meetings because they were making money out of AA. At times, they were actually shunned by fellow members. Even the charitably disposed described them as a necessary evil. Committees took full advantage of this attitude to depress their salaries. They could regain some measure of virtue, it was thought, if they worked for AA really cheap. These notions persisted for years, that we saw that if a hard-working secretary answered the phone dozens of times a day, listened to 20 wailing wives, arranged hospitalization and got sponsorship for 10 newcomers, and was gently diplomatic with the irate drunk who complained about the job she was doing and how she was overpaid, then such a person could surely not be called a professional AA. She was not professionalizing the 12th step. She was just making it possible. She was helping to give the man or woman coming in the door the break he or she ought to have. Volunteer committee men and assistants could be of great help, but they could not be expected to carry this load in, day out. It says here, the asterisk in the middle of the screen, Anthony, in 1954, the name of the Alcoholic Foundation Incorporated was changed to the General Service Board of AA Incorporated, and the foundation office is now the General Service Office. Let's just see, oh yes, I'll do another paragraph and then. Where are we? At the foundation, the same story repeats itself. 8 tons of books and literature per month do not package and channel themselves all over the world. Sacks of letters on every conceivable AA problem, ranging from a lonely heart Eskimo to the growing pains of thousands of groups, must be answered by persons who know. Right contacts with the world outside have to be maintained. AA's lifelines have to be tendered. So we hire AA staff members, we pay them well and they earn what they get. They are professional secretaries, but they certainly are not professional AA members. Over to you, Anthony.
Yep. Where are we? Sorry.
That's the fear.
Yeah, perhaps the fear will always lurk in every AA heart that one day our name will be exploited by somebody for real cash. Even the suggestion of such a thing never fails to whip up a hurricane. And we have discovered that hurricanes have a way of mauling with equal severity both the just and the unjust. They are always unreasonable. No individuals have been more buffeted by such emotional gusts than those AAs bold enough to accept employment with outside agencies dealing with the alcohol problem. A university wanted an AA member to educate the public on alcoholism. A corporation wanted a personal man familiar with the subject. A state drunk farm wanted a manager who could really handle inebriates. A city wanted an experienced social worker who understood what alcohol could do to a family. A state alcohol commission wanted a paid researcher. These are only a few of the jobs which AA members as individuals have been asked to fill. Now and then, AA members have bought farms or rest homes where badly beat up toppers could find needed care. The question was, and sometimes still is, are such activities to be branded as professionalism under AA tradition? We think the answer is no. Members who select such full-time careers do not professionalize AA's 12th step. The road to this conclusion was long and rocky at first. We couldn't see the real issue involved. In former days, the moment an AA hired out to such enterprises, he was immediately tempted to use one second. He was immediately tempted to use the name Alcoholics Anonymous for publicity or money-raising purposes. Drunk farms, educational ventures, state legislatures, and commissions advertised the fact that AA members served them. Unthinkingly, AA so employed recklessly broke anonymity to thump the tub for their pet enterprise. For this reason, some very good causes and all connected with them suffered unjust criticism from AA groups. More often than not, these onslaughts were spearheaded by the cry professionalism. That guy is making money out of AA, yet not a single one of them has been hired to do AA 12-step work. The violation in these instances was not professionalism at all. It was breaking anonymity. AA's sole purpose for being compromised and the name of Alcoholics Anonymous was being misused. Pass it on.
It is significant now that almost no AA in our fellowship breaks anonymity at the public level, that nearly all these fears have subsided. We see that we have no right to or need to discourage AAs who wish to work as individuals in these wider fields. It would be actually antisocial were we to forbid them. We cannot declare AA such a closed corporation that we keep our knowledge and experience top secret. If an AA member acting as a citizen can become a better researcher, educator, personal officer, then why not? Everybody gains and we have lost nothing. True, some of the projects to which AAs have attached themselves have been ill-conceived, but that makes not the slightest difference with the principle involved. This is the exciting welter of events which has finally cast up AA's tradition of non-professionalism. Our 12th step is never to be paid for, but those who labour in service for us are worthy of their hire. Well, Anthony, that is quite a reading.
I agree.
What's your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts around it is, I mean, it was never, this was put in place, obviously, unlike the previous 7 traditions, this is the first one that focuses on service centres rather than the groups themselves. Furthermore, really, it is the only tradition to cite a rule that has a special exception, which is this. Why is this so significant? Well, it's significant because they didn't want to bring the AA name into disrepute. The 12th step cannot be paid for So, as we've read, the famous 12 steps are more like suggestions that people can follow how they can see fit. Alcoholics Anonymous groups, however, are expected to adhere closely to the 12 traditions. Therefore, it is rather unexpected that an exception would be made. This surprising exception will actually serve as a basis when discussing how one might apply tradition 8 to his or her own life. Before we do see, we must first discuss the tradition, right? So we're discussing this now. So right off from the bat, you see two terms that require some explanations. The first is the word non-professional, and the second is special workers. To get a better understanding on how to apply to the 8th tradition, we must first understand how the terms apply to AA. So the concept of remaining non-professional stems in part from the same reasoning given for the tradition 7 when maintaining the first Alcoholics Anonymous groups. So Bill learned quickly that money interferes with spirituality. So like doctors and religious leaders play important roles in our lives in the 12-step program. But we couldn't see fit to employ them. But Bill's vision for the organization was to have sponsors and group members who would help their fellow sufferers, in AA, NA, CA, and nor for the potential lining of their pockets. So, it was all about really the generosity of spirit. So I believe that this tradition has been put in place. Obviously, reason being is they're saying, well, we will employ special workers because it's the backbone, it pays the way for what we do here. But, no one else gets paid. And what anyone else does outside the fellowship, long as it don't bring AA into disrepute or try, the 4th tradition, then and the 6th tradition as well, all the traditions, then it don't affect us. Do you know what I mean? So this is why these traditions had to be put in place to protect the scaffolding and the infrastructure of the 12-step fellowship. And it says it there, Alcoholics Anonymous will never have a professional class. We have gained some understanding of the ancient words, and who said them words? It's in the Bible. Freely you have received, spiritual book, freely give. It's the generosity of spirit. We have discovered that at the point of professionalism, money and spirituality do not mix. So that's my thoughts for now on that, Paul. I'll end up.
Well, that was a chap in Israel, a well-known chap.
A well-known chap, yeah.
The creator. Now, here's the thing, Anthony, for anyone that's listening, the beautiful thing about the traditions is that the holistic nature of them as the steps and the concepts. And that is to say that a conducive spiritual atmosphere that encourages and supports recovering addicts pertains because the group is principled, just as the individual member has to be principled in their lives to stay sober. The group has to be principled in order to provide a spiritually conducive atmosphere for recovery and sobriety. Now, these traditions are very, very simple. Each group is fully autonomous, fully self-supporting, right? So 6, 7, and 8 are the 3 traditions that mention money. 6, it's in terms of we don't pay to advertise the name of AACA or NA. Tradition 7 is we pay our own way. Tradition 8, and this is just paraphrasing, tradition 8 is, and with that money we collect, it doesn't end up in any of our members' pockets. So we pay our own way, and in real terms, for the majority of face-to-face meetings, that's paying for the room once or twice a week, paying for the tea, the coffee, the biscuits, the key tags, and the literature. And if there's anything left over, you can send it further down the chain, not up the chain. Its service structure is an upside-down pyramid. The group and the members are at the pinnacle, and all the service structure is there to serve the groups, Anthony. That's how it works. And as I say, 6, 7, and 8. And so we're fully self-supporting, fully autonomous, with one primary purpose: to carry a healthy message of sobriety to the whosoever. We realize that our common welfare comes first, which is tradition 1, because personal recovery depends upon CA unity. And then the next thing is, we're governed by a group conscience, and tradition 2 says there's only one supreme authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. So, the principles are very, very clear, Anthony. And as I say, 3 of the traditions concern money. Now, there's nothing wrong with money. A young man who I just started having the privilege of going through the 12 steps with was concerned about this in his relationship with God just last week when we started the steps, Anthony. Oh, I'm not sure, he said, I got told that you can't have money and serve God. And obviously a little truth can be a dangerous thing, and so we spent some time talking about that and looking at what is written around that. And there's nothing wrong with money. The problem is the love of money. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And of course, the principle of this tradition is, yes, we collect money to be fully self-supporting, but we don't line our own pockets with that money under any circumstances. And I think the readings are crystal clear, Anthony, that we've just read, and I think the great thing to bear in mind is that altruism is easy when there's no money involved. And on the 12 traditions illustrator that we had on at the beginning of our gathering this morning, Anthony, it had a chap hanging a sign outside of his office, AA work for drunks, $10 an hour. It is quite a common thing. I myself have met persons that have been trying to make money out of 12-step work, and it is completely free in every way. It's completely altruistic. And it's in the giving we receive. And I like what I believe. I think you read it, Anthony. It says the only reward they got was their continued sobriety.
Absolutely. It's self-insurance, really. It talks about it in the back of the book, actually. It talks about it in the medical view. It talks about it in the religious view as well. And this ain't a religious program, it's a spiritual program of action. When you look at the all-encompassing, these principles, there's 36 of them, obviously the steps, the traditions and the concepts. And you look how they all intertwine into each other. And tradition 2, for our group purpose is one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience, our leaders are trusty servants, they do not govern. And all the other encompassing traditions as well as they go along. And as you rightly said, Paul, they all intertwine as well into each other. When you look at it, the meaning of non-professional, the concepts of remaining non-professional stems in part from the same reasoning given for tradition 7, when maintaining the first Alcoholics Anonymous group. So, this is where it comes into play. Although AA specifically states that it is against employing staff, it recognises, understandably so, that an organisation as large as Alcoholics Anonymous, will need paid workers to keep running smoothly. The reason behind this exception, caretakers who swept floors, as it talks about, we've just read that, cooks who fired hamburgers, secretaries in offices, authors writing books, all these we have seen hotly assailed because they were, as the critics angrily remarked, making money out of AA, ignoring the fact that these labours were not 12-step jobs. They weren't the 12-step jobs at all. The critics attacked us as AA professionals, these workers of ours who were often doing thankless tasks that no one else could or would do. Right, so the first AA group's attempting to enlist volunteers for these jobs, but to no avail. So the 12th step, as we know, we can't mix materialism with spirituality. The 12th step and what we do once we've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we work the first 11 steps, and what we freely received through that experience of doing it and doing the requirements and the suggestions and what we need to do by following these principles. A promise follows the principle. And then it says, many did not enjoy the work and therefore neglected to perform it. Still, they needed people to manage their offices and to look after the meeting places in modern groups. Some of these tasks are managed by volunteers. But thanks to the 8th tradition, those who require paid help are permitted to seek it without fear of rebuke from the General Service Board. So, so there's been a lot of criticism around it. Some might say that special workers advocated by the 8th edition should be non-addicts. This would ensure that nobody could accuse AA or NA of allowing members to profit from their disease. But the 12 and 12 notes a problem with this, which is that non-addicts and non-alcoholics lack familiarity with the program. In many ways, we understand this viewpoint. Many of our own staff members have suffered from alcoholism and addiction themselves, which offers them first-hand perspective into the challenges their patients are facing and make them extra empathetic, compassionate, and relatable. And as you said about the triangle, being turned upside down, world serving the area, and the area serving the group. Groups, in early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, the special workers who suffer from addiction were given lowly pay. It was believed that making less money would allow them to maintain their spiritual growth and non-profit motive. So nowadays, the prevailing opinion is that special workers are not professionals. This would have the same conflicts of interest. Special workers aren't being paid to sponsor people, but to ensure that a program of sponsorship and spiritual growth is possible in the first place. So they're paving the way. As such, the 8th tradition frowns upon arbitrarily cutting the wages of those who pour their blood, sweat, and tears into the program central. Because a lot of people, this is why they had to put it in place. So how to apply the 8th tradition is, unless we happen to work with the General Service Board, there aren't many ways to practice the 8th tradition as written, but we may still learn some valuable principles from everything we're learning here and what we're discussing. Because as we spoke about on our last podcast, these traditions can be applied into your everyday life, in your home, in your occupation, into your community, and obviously we use them in the fellowship in our groups. So note that the early 8 groups, note what they're saying in what we just read. Initial decisions not to employ special workers arose largely from fear. They were so afraid of conflating money with spirituality that they ignored their own needs. So a lot of them are frightened of relapsing as well. And it ain't about, the love of money. Like money, but don't love money. Because if you start liking money, then it is a form of idolatry. The greed, the gluttony. Do you know what I mean? And naturally, this served only to enhance those needs until they remained no other option. We must never ignore our needs out of fear. When we find ourselves afraid, we should talk to our sponsors or other trusted individuals, consult those whose decision, so if you're unsure about stuff and you're in a group, go to your sponsor or talk to other individuals who are a bit further on up the road than you, and consult those whose decision making always proves sound. And if they tell you to go ahead and face your fears, you should listen to them, Right. I'm going to hand it back with you, Paul, for a minute.
I think, being honourable and authentic around money is very important. And, I do so hope there are listeners, Anthony, that are in the process of learning about the traditions and perhaps the concepts going forward in order to improve the quality of their sobriety and fiscal responsibility. That is to say, financial verity and financial uprightness is absolutely core to recovery. Many of us in active addiction spent thousands and sometimes tens of, and I've met persons who spent over £100,000 on drugs, including alcohol, over the years. And becoming honourable and righteous around cash is very, very, very important. And of course, this tradition particularly has in view members of 12-step fellowships. The reality is, Anthony, that a lot of, I would say probably, a certain percentage of persons that are in the rooms do seek to make money out of recovery. They do. I've known, and I do know some that do, not in terms of the CA name or the AA name, thankfully, but in their own time, they do work and they use the knowledge and the information that's freely given in the rooms to better their own careers. We used to have one chap who used to come along to meetings and soak up the messages, and we found out that he was selling such knowledge and counselling sessions using the knowledge he'd learnt in the rooms. And of course, folks do that in the real world, but I think what's in view here, Anthony, is really being honourable around money, and it's no coincidence it comes after Edition 7. Each group should be fully self-supporting, and with that money, it doesn't end up in each other's pockets. I think that's the principle of view. Now, I've got up on the screen here the reading We Can Recover, and I'm conscious there may be persons that have just come onto this podcast that are still using drugs, including alcohol, and are looking for a way out. It is possible to have long-term sobriety in these rooms. What we do is we practice abstinence, and then we develop a spiritual program of action outlined in our basic textbook called Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book. Now, it and the book we was reading from earlier, which is the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, can be listened to or read completely free 24/7 at aa.org. If anyone wants extra help, please feel free to reach out in the conversation beneath wherever this broadcast is posted. And please come along to a meeting. On the screen right now is a list of meetings. The ones in blue are on every single day. So there's lots of meetings, and anyone's welcome wherever you are on the planet. But these times, for purpose of brevity, are given in Great British time, in UK time. So every morning at 7:30 over on the top left, the Breakfast Club, 9:30, Great Gratitude, 10:30, Pop-Up Recovery. We Can Recover is on at 2 p.m, 8 p.m, and 9:30 every day. In the middle of the screen, lower middle, there's two ladies' meetings, 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Over at the top right, Daily Reprieve every night at 9:30, Reaching Out 11, and Tazana at midnight, as well as hundreds of other meetings. That's just some of the meetings. If you need immediate help, there's the UK Samaritans at the bottom right there, and there's the Cocaine Anonymous New York helpline in the centre at the bottom, and the London helpline at the bottom left. So, Anthony, it's been a pleasure as always. And, recovery is a wonderful thing. Sobriety is the gift that keeps on giving. And, there's a lot of help available, isn't there? And it is completely on the altruistic plane.
Absolutely. I'm just going to kind of bring it in the context, and sobriety is about what I can give and not what I can take. Although another of AA's principles is to maintain self-sufficiency, as you spoke about there, the seventh tradition, Paul, as well as we've spoken about on this podcast, the eighth tradition reminds us that we must still ask for help every once in a while, because we don't learn to ask for help when we need it most. We may jeopardize far more than our sobriety alone. And when you look at this, finally, the eighth tradition teaches us that we shouldn't always enforce our own principles on others. So towards the end of the chapter, in tradition 8 and the 12 and 12, it states, we see that we have no right or need to discourage AAs who wish to work as individuals in the wider field, as we've spoken about on the podcast. It would be actually antisocial were we to forbid them. We cannot declare AAs such a closed corporate. We cannot declare AA as such a closed corporation that we keep our knowledge and experience top secret. If a CA member acting as a citizen can become a better researcher, an educator, personal officer, then why not? Everybody gains, and we have lost nothing. True, some of the projects to which AAs have attached themselves have been ill-conceived, and that makes not the slightest difference with the principle involved. As we said, it was put in place so it would, so the 12-step AA, NACA would not be brought into disrepute, and the 12th step could not be paid for. The only people that could be paid were special workers, and other than that, we're fully self-supporting, and it's about, what we learn, I believe, in sobriety, and it's very common with addicts. and alcoholics, you know, losing the value of money. And I've met people that have had, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands spent on them just in treatment centres, you know, and I've met people that have been funded once and got it, you know. But the thing is, it's very common that addicts and alcoholics lose the value of money because we lose the power of choice. But what happens is when we start gaining sobriety, continuous sobriety, a day at a time, we start learning how to steward the money. So this is where the seventh tradition comes in about fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Always a pleasure and an honor. And, you know, we just pray and we hope, Paul, it's always a pleasure that somebody's got something out of this podcast today. And, you know, we pray and hope, you know, for the still suffering drug addicts, alcoholics and their families. And we pray that God will bless you according to his will. Amen.
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in, Anthony. You know, I too have seen persons and had conversations with persons in rooms, and I've actually had the question put to me. So are you saying I can stay clean without paying this 8 or 10 grand to go into this rehab? And the answer was yes. And they did. Okay, they didn't make a perfect start, this particular individual involved, but he and his wife were very pleased. We spent a lot of time together going through the steps. And I think in his first year, he had three times he picked up, but for one night only. And now he's got some continuous sobriety, and it's not cost him a penny. Conversely, I know persons, well, I know one person who I'm still working at the moment, and their family spent, I think they've spent over 12 or 15,000 pounds on various rehabs, and they're still not clean. So that's a very important point you make there, you know, that anyone can get and stay clean, and it won't cost them a penny. On the contrary, you know, they'll get a pay raise for staying clean. You know, that's one of the beautiful gifts of sobriety, you know. So yeah, it's been a pleasure, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming along today, and we'll be back soon with another recording. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the solution family, stay in the literature, stay in prayer, stay close to the meetings, and consistent step work. Slow and steady wins the race. It is a marathon, not a sprint, as you often say, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Yep, it isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Sometimes it can be a triathlon, but keep pushing in, guys. God bless.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye, family.